Hi everyone, welcome to I'm Recruiter podcast. I'm your host Prafula Deori, and we have a very special guest, Kingsley. So Kingsley have a ton of experience. So the reason why we wanted him in our podcast to share about his journey, like how he have grown in his career, so that we all can learn different things from him, and which definitely will be helpful in our career journey. So thank you, Kingsley, for your time, and looking forward for interesting discussion. And once again, you have been always uh, been supporting I'm Recruiter from multiple times. So thank you so much. Yeah. So why don't you quickly introduce yourself, Kingsley?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Prafula, for inviting me for this podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Kingsley Kurian, and I have close to 2 decades of experience into talent acquisition as well as HR and IR, and a lot of things that I've handled in the last close to about 20 years. I've done my MBA from Hyderabad, and post that. I I was an IT guy, IT recruiter. Started off with IT as recruitment, where there were about 150 people in a week that I had to recruit. Else it was always a threat that I would lose my job someday. But but thankfully I could stick there. And I also worked in pharma, real estate, in terms of clinical research. I was instrumental in setting up Arbindo Realty in Hyderabad, the entire real estate business in 5 years. So from a five-member team to close to about a 5,000 odd member organization, in about 5 to 6 years that I could set up. Uh, but obviously, that all happened with respect to the support from my team. And how I transitioned from a recruiter to an HR has been primarily getting into an HR was primarily with respect to as an accident, you can call it, right? I would not have been in HR. Maybe after I completed my degree, I was so excited that I wanted to work in the BPO space, and I landed up a good job, which was paying very good, as such. But only thing, it was night shifts. But when I came with my offer letter back home, my parents declined, saying that you're not going to get into that kind of a role in the night shifts, especially when we are around, right? So, and they it was a long tussle. I mean, primarily, 1 week was like, I had the offer, I had to tell them that I had to confirm that. But somehow that took a different stage. After 1 week, I ended up deciding that I will do an MBA, because that was
Okay.
all. Maybe the parents' influence was so much that that I had some other plans, right? Something else. I wanted to get into the BPO, try to see how it works, and all that. But life has a different thing for everybody, right? And I became an HR by accident, but not now. I mean, but now it is by choice. So I feel, somewhere, those things have also come into play. So this is how it is. And currently I'm heading HR and administration for a startup company called Tridasa. I'm helping them set up their real estate business in Hyderabad as such. So
Okay.
that's primarily about me, Prafula.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Kingsley. So, just wanted to understand a little bit background of yours. Like, are you basically from Hyderabad, born and brought up in Hyderabad, or you have shifted to Hyderabad?
We are originally from Kerala. My
Okay.
parents were settled in Hyderabad since 87 onwards,
Okay.
and I'm like a pure Hyderabadi now. Less of a Keralite, more of a Hyderabadi. And I stay with my family. My wife is a banker. I have a daughter who's 12 years old, and wife used to stay in Lucknow. She was there, and post marriage she was here. She's come here as such.
Okay.
So that's how it is.
Nice. So, I feel your name is very unique.
Yeah.
So, just wanted to ask a little bit about your name. Like, what
Yeah.
the meaning of your name, Kingsley?
Okay. The meaning of my name is called King of the Meadows. That's primarily what it means. But my name came through, Ben Kingsley, as such, where, through
Okay.
the movie Gandhi, which was released in 1982. That's my year of birth.
Okay.
When that was released, Ben Kingsley played the role of Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi. So I was named, after that actor, if I can tell you. So, that is how my name came in, right? If you want more details, you may need to ask my parents as well.
Thank you for sharing. Because I whenever I saw first time I saw your name, right, it looks very unique and
Yeah,
different. But
yeah,
again, so I always had this in mind. Whenever I get chance, I will definitely ask this
yeah.
question to you. Great.
So
So you have been in the industries for almost like 20 plus years. You have been in talent acquisition space, then moved to HR space, right? So you have seen lots of different evolution altogether, right?
yeah.
So how was in back your starting of your career days, like how was HR or talent acquisition altogether, and how is it today in terms of evolution?
Okay. Now, when I started off, as a recruiter as such, at that time we only had some job boards, right? Today the market is filled with job boards, right? I mean, you have
Yes.
lot of job boards, lot of job portals, for getting attracting candidates. You have your AI, ML, all those things, what all technologies that you use to get candidates. At that time you didn't have too many, right? You just had very few. It was basically your walk-ins. Companies used to depend on walk-ins. You have your portal that is only one of the major portal that is there. And you have internal references which they used to drive to a major extent as such, right? Those traditional ways of recruitment was what it primarily was. Now if you look at what is there currently, there's a sea change, right? I mean, today, you get the recruiters are behind. Earlier people were behind jobs, but now the recruiters are behind people for jobs, right? So that's how the
Yes.
situation is now, right? Earlier the candidates were behind jobs, right? So, and because you have so many avenues, right? I mean, you post an ad on Facebook, you get 5,000 kind of responses, right? So that's the kind of thing. And every now and then you have so many HR startups that it's quite easy for you to get a candidate. But at that time, I mean, it was very difficult. You had very limited streams where you could get people as such. Yeah, walk-ins and all were part of it, but you didn't have technology that was so supportive at that time. So maybe the technological change has been very, very huge nowadays as such.
Great, great, great. Thank you for sharing that. So again, like you have been in talent acquisition space altogether, you have been in HR space as well, right? So again, like whenever an HR person needs to grow or a talent acquisition person needs to grow, what's your suggestion or advice? Like, uh, do they need to transition into a HR to grow in their career, or can they grow being in talent acquisition itself? Because we have also seen that many of the CHRO becoming CEO of the companies as well, right? So what's your input? Or
See, that's on a personal choice, Prafula. I mean, see, if you want to learn, the nitty-gritties of HR, the so-called, things about your labor laws, or how the statutory part is, and all that. I think someday you'll have to transition, right? Recruitment is more like the sales job in HR,
yeah,
right? You complete your targets, you're fine up there, right? If you don't,
yeah,
then you know what happens, right? So it's not for the fear that I've changed path from recruitment to HR, but I wanted to consciously get into it, to understand how the laws work. There were lot many terms, the factories act, where I was managing one of the factory. I had to ensure that all that has to go through that, right?
yeah,
Even if what all the workers, in terms of, you need to have a workman compensation, you need to have policies going for them, right? Everything as per factory has to be done. Now that was something that was a different ball game altogether, right? It's not everybody's cup of tea. And
yes,
there's so much to learn in HR. I mean, okay, recruitment is something that smarter people definitely will have their say in terms of getting candidates and putting them on. It's not easy. I mean, recruitment, you do all the hard work at the back, and then at the time of joining, you don't see the candidate. It is very, very disappointing, right? So both the roles have their own, things. But HR, you have plethora of, options as such, right? You can be a performance management champ, you can be a training guy, you could look at your statutory bit as well, right? How things go on. Payroll is something that is different, right? So all this, comes in. So I've been trained on every aspect, right? I mean, all gamuts of HR. I started with being a very passionate recruitment guy, right? I mean, I was so passionate that, the numbers that I used to chase was almost about 115 a week, right? So that's the kind of, numbers. I mean, that's for the entire team. But if you look at least about 60%, 70% was to come from the direct team which I was part of. So that was a crazy recruitment which we used to do. And beyond a point, what happened is it got the better of me, right?
Okay.
There were times when I couldn't go beyond something as such, because what happened is, it kind of be gets you stagnated, right? You
Yes.
need to know, something more, right? And maybe because at that time I didn't have so many technologies to work on, maybe because now today it's very interesting. Recruitment as a this one is too interesting because you have too many tools to work on, right? You didn't have too many, right? You just get the candidate, you are in there in the job, or else you're not there.
Yeah.
So that is something that is part of a role. But the reason why I transitioned is basically, if you're looking at a better career growth as such, this transition in the organization, when they repose their trust in you, they will definitely move you to HR. That's how what happened when I was with the Arvindo Group. I started off as a recruitment guy, as an assistant manager. When I left Arvindo Group, I was a GM, so GM HR, as such. I was initially doing recruitment for 1 year, and after 1 year, they started giving me bit by bit, the responsibilities as such. And I was instrumental in setting up many group companies, under the Arvindo umbrella as such. I mean, that all happened where, somewhere, I could take the lead to go ahead. I had a penchant. What I can only say is, if you have the penchant for learning, I think there's nothing that you can't do. You can do everything.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Kingsley. I think so. The reason why I ask this question is, even I am a passionate recruiter. And when I see, sometimes if I need to think about my growth path and all, I sometimes think that in certain level, if I go and process, it might be stagnant in TA,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And what next, right? Do I need to only do the same thing by changing the job, or do I need to learn something different? And a similar way, when I was talking to multiple recruiters as well, so similar kind of topic came up, right? So they are very much passionate, but they don't want to move to HR as well. So
Absolutely.
again, it
See,
depends on every individual.
yeah, Prafula, it's the fear primarily, right? HR, they don't want to get into all the laws part of it, the statutory part of it, there are a lot of calculations which comes in and all these things as such. But I'll tell you, if you do not get into it, if you do not take risks in your career, you will never grow. And that
Yes.
has been a big example, primarily out of my personal life as such. I joined the Arvindo Group as a recruitment guy, right? But when I left after serving them for more than 12, 14 years, I left on the lines as a GM. I transitioned. I mean, it was very difficult. I didn't know anything, right? HR ka H nahi pata tha. I didn't know anything, in terms of, what was there. I was only a recruitment guy, only getting people, putting them in, and my job is done, right? I complete my targets, and that's how it was there. But I one day decided, I mean, if I'm like this, someday what happens is, if there's a hiring freeze, what happens, right? The job
Recruiters get
hit.
fired.
Absolutely, the recruiters get fired. So that's the time when I slowly started to learn. One of my colleague who was there in the same office was doing the HR kind of work, and I wanted to also, when I complete my recruitments, I used to sit with him and try to learn and know what is happening. Slowly, slowly, I developed certain things, and on his absence, I could manage one of the issue which was there. And then they also gave me the HR portfolio too. Slowly, I learned the hard way, right? I learned
Okay.
the payroll way, the statutory thing, how it works out. What is the license that you need to take for, your labor, what is how many people you need to get into PF and all these things. So all the nitty gritty things of it, even the calculation bit of it, everything I got into it. So slowly, bit by bit, learning all that is, I also wanted to invest. I was not worried about the salary bit. Salary you will get later on in your life, right? But if you learn, I think, nothing can stand, in front of you if you learn things well. And that's how, that has been my success mantra, right? They say, right, you have to be foolish to get to the top, right?
Yes,
You,
yes,
that's there's nothing wrong in that, right? And even if you don't know, it's always better to ask and learn, rather than pretending to be all and know all of everything, but you do not know anything in the end, right? So that is how it has been, my journey, right from a junior recruiter to a senior, person in the HR, has all come through, all this. I mean, you have to have that penchant to learn, right? And there are a lot of people whom I see, the moment they say HR, they will not get into it, because what happens is your growth gets stagnated, right? You are a
yes,
senior
yes.
recruiter. What after senior recruiter, right? What do you want to do, right? And the job is so limited. You only have one function to handle, right? And you don't get your numbers, you're fired. Hiring freeze, you're fired, right? So there is something that internal job thing happens, you're fired, right? But HR is something that, I'm not comparing anything. Both have their own, good and bad as well. But HR as a function, primarily when you get to know of everything, right? When you are a master of everything, I think nobody can come and tell you, point out anything, right? so
Yep,
so now
yep,
I'm
yep.
managing right from TA to the, exit, everything from hire to retire, everything I'm managing. Obviously my teams are there, with their support only, I would. But in terms of the HR strategies, the directions, in terms of, getting things done, always comes through. So I always have this: if you do not create or do value add things, you will get phased out.
Yep, yep, yep.
So you
I,
do
I
a
think
repeat. Yeah.
I think that's happened. Even we have seen the already that in the market, right? All
Absolutely.
the most of the recruiters, many of them get laid off, right?
Yes.
And did we saw the same in HR comparatively less or
Yes.
no? But
Mhm.
most of the people are recruiters. So
Yeah,
and
because obviously, you don't have an opportunity post that, right? I mean, see, if you need a promotion, and sometimes we also complain that we don't get a promotion, there should be a vacancy also, right? I mean, there are so many recruiters, right? You might be one among the lot, right? But how do you make a difference, right? It is obviously through your work, through, what it is, but you have to go further. What I only encourage people to do is, you have to go further than what you have one concentrate on one, segment as such.
interesting, interesting. So there has been like some discussions which recently happened with some of the recruiters. There was a topic where they told that like we want to transition from transactional recruiter to a advisory, strategic advisory partner. Uh,
Yeah.
but most of the time, business doesn't bother to support us or to consider us compared to other HR folks, right?
Right.
So this is one of the most of the recruiters have this thing in their mind, and they want to become a strategic business partner or
Yeah.
like a talent partner. But again, like, what is your suggestion? How like what are the things they should include so that the business can build their trust on that particular advisor?
Right. See, if they are recruiters in a current organization, maybe IT for an example, right? Now you have the concept of HR BPs. Many of them are, getting into that kind of a role as well. Now they apply for it, all that. But while you're doing the recruitment, it's always, necessary to have that relationship maintained with the business, right? The moment you do that is when they will consider you for roles, and the business only will speak, saying that, hey, look, what I want Kingsley for this, for our business as a HR business partner, or I want Prafula as the, HR head for this division. So that is how it comes in. A typical example was, I was hiring for one of the finance, COE. I was in a company, an Irish clinical research firm. There were recs which were not completed for the last 1 year, right?
Okay,
Because they were very particular in their approach. They wanted very particular, kind of candidates, which maybe you might not even find on Mars as well, right? But I changed the entire scenario within about 6 months from the time when I joined, right? The reason is I had constant, communications with the business, getting and sitting with them, right? I was more on their desk than me sitting on my desk, right? And trying to tell them that, this is what the business needs. These are where people are. These are where the pockets of people are required, because we use some tools like your talent neuron, where you get
Yeah.
information of people, where they are and all this. And there was something called as Glover Daniels, where we used to map these people, as such. So all this market data I used to give to the business, right? And to be very frank, I became a BP as well as a recruiter for them,
Okay.
right? For any employee issues, they used to come back to me. So
Okay.
it's basically building that connect with the business. I know, every time, see what happens is we speak to them with respect to a JD. We take a JD, we post it, then we send some candidates. We go to them only when the candidates are sent and when the interviews are lined up, right?
Yeah.
But there's a
Yeah.
constant relationship, there's a constant communication you have to keep. And while I was doing all this, the director suggested that the HRBP role also be given to me. It's not, I'm not saying that, it is easy to get. Yes, many organizations do not allow that. If you feel they do not allow that and you want to learn HR, first learn it, and then when you get an opportunity, please leave.
Okay.
Because you have to grow in life, you have to take risks, and you have to take risks. Certain times it can be uncalculated too. See, I took a big risk when I had to, because it's a, I'm getting from the devil to the deep blue sea, right? You don't know where you're getting into, right? You
Yes.
might drown,
Yes.
or you may learn to swim. But if you learn to swim against the tide, I think, you are definitely, there. And no business will say no if you go and sit, with them and talk to them, tell them information. It's always that, even in the HR, I tell my folks as well, if the HR does not have a seat at the business, you are lost.
Yep. Yep.
That's how it is. Even when I set up, the Arbindo reality space as such completely, I was very particular that it had to be a HR driven kind of an organization, not just from a CEO's perspective or a CFO's perspective, right? You had to have certain processes, which are top notch and which is on par with the industry, right? So all this comes, in terms of ensuring that there's a proper strategy. It all comes in HR. That strategy you will not get in talent acquisition, right? Talent acquisition, you only get strategy for hiring people, you get
Yep.
folks inside, right? So when you want all this, you have to be with the business. Tell them that you are more interested, you need to know people, right? I know of some people who have hired for the business, but nobody in the business knows them, right? The reason is you've not done the networking, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
forget, we only give the profiles, or we finish with the journey and that's it, over. But that connect has to come. That's why they say, right, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day kind of
Yes.
post join.
Yes.
What is the measurement that you do with the candidate? That's how you primarily look at as such.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's say I'm just giving mine example. Let's say I want to move into an HR role from the talent acquisition. So what's your suggestion? Like, what's the step-by-step transition I need to take? Or let's say any other recruiter who want to move to an HR role.
Right. See, being in the same role, you have to start learning the HR bit. And
Okay.
the HR bit, we think, certain times it might be easy, but it is very deceptively very, very difficult. Because what happens is, payroll also, even if you have to calculate, I'm just giving an example, right?
Yep.
You have to get your inputs from attendance. You have to ensure that, that has been fed onto a system, right? You check the entire previous month's difference and this month's difference. You have to calculate in penny, right? Even if there's a 1 rupee difference, the payroll guy, will be breaking his head to see where this has gone, right? You have to learn, right from the laws, your labor law, your posh acts, your PF, ESIC, all that. How does it happen, right? These are very, very simple things, right? But what happens is many organizations, just leave it. They will say, okay, maybe you comply, you do not comply, whatever it is. Many of them do not have the knowledge also, right?
Yeah.
It's always necessary for us to know the acts, right? That is the first point. In terms of when you're talking about an employee issue, you need to know what is the act, right? What is a gratuity act, right? What is a payment of bonus act, right? Those things, everything comes as part of it. when I am going to handle a worker there, I have to see what are some of his things, like your have you taken your workman compensation policy for him, or have you taken this BOCW Act, that is your Building and Other Construction Workers Act, interstate migrant license, as such. All these comes into picture. Why it comes is because for the welfare of the worker, or the person who works at the site. Now, when you want to get into HR, you need to do some research, right?
Okay.
We just cannot just go in and get in HR. It will not work out, right? You have to have the knowledge, and especially the statutory knowledge. I always insist upon, even my recruiter in my organization, I train him on statutory and the other things. The reason is because tomorrow when he leaves also, he will get a job even in HR, right?
Yes.
So that's how we need to put across. And HR is not just confined to certain things. HR is confined to everything, right from the life cycle, from when the employee has landed in your organization till the time when he leaves. All activities are done by HR, right? The first phase of the organization is a recruiter. The next, to manage him in the organization, is the HR. And
End to end cycle, I would say.
absolutely. And when you have to manage the employee, you have to learn everything. You have to be smarter than him, right? Suddenly
Yes.
he will come and ask you, things. How did you calculate my salary? What would you say? You need to know what is the
Yes.
percentage of basic. Is it 50%? Why are you giving me travel allowance? I don't want travel allowance, right? But you will have to tell him that this is how it has been, formulated, right? You have to give him a very, very clear cut idea about his compensation, right? How he is getting it. Why is my net pay less? Sometimes you get queries, right, from employees. My net pay is less. Why is that come?
Yes.
Right? But you have to say there is PT deduction of 200 rupees. There is a PF of 12%, which gets deducted. You have your IT as well, right? IT, you have to that's another ocean as well, right? When the employee comes, you will fight. My IT was not so much deducted in my previous organization like this, but you
Yes.
deducted so much, right? When it comes to somebody has 30%, 20%, 10% bracket, it goes like that. Other organizations, they may have managed it, from another angle. Here, when it comes, it's a complete tax, and for the entire year, when you calculate, it's prorated, so much. So all this comes in the life cycle of an employee, right? And you have to be better prepared, right? You cannot say that, oh no, I will check and tell you, right? It will not work out. The moment you need to know your CTC structures and the laws, on your fingertips. I'm not saying everything, but whatever you're working with strongly has to be known. When you know this is when you can look at a transition in HR, because I learned the hard way, right? I learned it right from the beginning. Whatever has to happen from the A to HR to the Z of HR, I have got into it. But I'm not saying I'm completely a pro in everything, right? There might be many other laws which I might not even know, right? So it's always, and also minimum wages, right? Every 6 months it gets changed, right? You
Yes.
need to know what is for semi-skilled, for a skilled worker, or for a not skilled worker, how much it is. So that every 6 months, April and October, it changes. You need to know how many points it has been added, how many VDA points has been added, how many, what is the change in the this one. So sometimes it will be 450 rupees per day, right? So that's a kind of a calculation. So how you do it into 30, right? So this entire thing you need to understand. When you know this topography only is when, I'm not scaring anybody, but again, what I'm saying is, when you get to know something is when you will be able to transition. So you are better equipped than the other HR colleagues in the department when you know all these laws as such, right? So that's my take on that. And primarily, with this only, and a working knowledge, because just by knowing, see, I know, okay, as per section so and so to salaries, as per section so and so to salaries means lieu of payment. Not that. It is basically, you need to also have a working knowledge. When you
Yes.
deduct PF, how much do you deduct, right? 12% you deduct on basic, right? Whatever. So this is what is your thing that you have to put in. So when you know this is when you will be able to go up to upstream to the next one, right? Slowly there are other activities as well, like your performance, right? Performance, how do you manage your KRAs, right? It's a big task, right?
Yes.
Your mid-year review, annual year review, you do a normalization or you do a 9 box, whatever it is something that the HR has to do. Whatever you're doing the risk, and people will start cursing you, all those things, that is always there. They are scared about this. I'm telling you, many of the HR people do not get into HR is because they're scared about all this, back end work, right? Are employee comes and asks me, a lot of things. I'm not be able to answer to all those queries. But if you have to grow, nothing comes easy. right? Nothing comes easy, my friend. Everything is very difficult in life. You have to go get there, and you have to take risk. You don't take, you will be where you are, right? You will still
True.
be doing 10 requisitions in a month or 20 requisitions a month, and that's it. Aram say, bus, that's it. And when you get 2% increment or 5% increment, then you don't complain, right? So you have to plan your stream accordingly as such.
Great, great. So one thing, follow up question which I have for you is like you also mentioned about like you got like the seat role as talent partner as well as HRBP, right? So definitely you also mentioned about building a good relationship with the business, right?
Right.
So many of times whenever I'm talking to some of the junior recruiters, they are facing difficulties to build relationship with the business. So what's your
Correct.
tip? Like what is the best way to build the relationship, to build the trust with the business and slowly move to the different transition from TA to HRBP or business
Right.
partner?
Now, Prafula, there's one role called talent advisor. Talent advisor is someone who advises the business about in which pockets do you get your manpower, or in which pockets do you can hire, or where you can hire or you cannot hire, right? Business is like that, right? You go to any organization, business is always ruthless. Maybe the people agenda or maybe the talent agenda will be last on their chart, right? The first thing is how better is my PNL, as simple as that,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And all that, if you have to and because HR is always a cost centric department, right? Everybody
yeah,
treats it, right? A thankless job too, right? I'm not
yeah,
scaring anybody or demotivating anyone, but it is like, we have to pat ourselves on our back to ensure that we've done a great job, right? Nobody will tell you that HR has done a great job. Nobody will tell, right? It is basically, when you are with the business and you talk their language, is when they will involve you in their affairs, right? I was part of one group where initially I also had some struggles, right? Even when they were not involving me, but I stood with them, right? Even in the wrong, bad times as well, in terms of whenever the candidates were not there or talent pool was not available, I used to go back to the business and tell them that this is what we are doing. These are certain things which we found out. These are certain things which you can look at developing. It's all about creating that value with the business. You have to be first to tell them where you get people, not the business telling you that. Now, like in certain scenarios, what happens is the business tells the recruiter, you go here, get the candidates, right? It doesn't work out like that. You have to give them your take on where you have people, where you have talent, how do you retain talent is your strategy. If you leave that to business, business will not treat HR the way that HR has to be treated. So you have to talk the line of business. For that, you need to know the business. You have to be more confident than them to tell them. See, because today, in many of the meetings of the business, I am part of it. The reason I'm part of it is because I've created that value there. Right? Today, they don't have a meeting without me, without the HR part. So at least if I'm not there, my representative goes. So you have to have a say at the table. I always tell this to my HR people, right? HR and all my industry folks and as such. You do not have a say, you are left out. And there are times when they might not listen to you once, twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times, or 10 times, whatever it is. But from the 11th time you keep telling the same thing, right? Someday they will listen. It has happened to me so many times, and I also feel rejected, right? Why are they treating HR people like this? And especially it happens in a pharma kind of a setup or a clinical research kind of setup. They don't have time. You have to take the lead. You are the master. You have to take the lead. And when we don't do that, when the D-Day comes, when the candidates do not come in, that's the time when the HR had it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's a mix of a very it's like how a daughter-in-law treats her mother-in-law. So business is a mother-in-law,
Nice
daughter-in-law is,
example.
so right? I mean, she might be stern. First day they might treat you well, but over the months, over the years, the treatment changes. But how you maintain that cordiality with them is on that person, right? I mean, business is something that they will not listen to any of these cost centric departments, right? They are something that they are looking at. You're not giving them any revenue, right? But what you can give them revenue is through your inputs,
Yep.
right? And that is considered an HR kind of an setup. I think it's always necessary that the HR people always speak out, right? We cannot always say yes, to everything, right? That's what I also say, because what happens is, if there is an HR way of saying it, that is something that has to be told. It cannot be business every time. Okay, I understand. 90% our thing is that we'll have to ensure that the business also looks at it. But if I was looking at the business, I wouldn't have grown, Prafulla. To be very frank with you, I'm a very hard hitting guy when it comes to the business part and all these things. And I take my own call certain times, but I tell them that this is the risk that I'm taking. But touchwood, whatever risks I've taken, it has all paid me dividends. But there are certain times when it has gone the other way around also, but nothing happens. It's a learning, right?
Yes.
I still know when during COVID, when there were 5 deaths which happened, I made the management sign off a compensation policy apart from your regular statutory payments, and each family getting almost about 50-60 lakhs, right, is a sense of a great thing, right, a big thing, right? You feel so happy. So it was like this, like the CTCs completely were paid 5 times,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So that was a kind of a compensation that I came about, and the business was surprised that I could get this from the management, right? So that is a kind of a value you do. When you are in the business of people, you have to be human first to be into HR,
Yes.
right? We always talk about a lot of things in the forum, but when we come out of it, nothing really gets on with it, right? It is only your simple approach towards people is when what makes you. And HR is like somewhere in between, right? You have to manage, the management, you have to manage the employees, all those things comes in. But what happens is, not everything, from the business or the management, has their say with people. You have to always you have to always see your peers, right? You have to always see the other groups, how they are doing,
Organization.
right? So these are all things. I'm saying, I know, there might be businesses which do not allow recruiters to go into the next level. I mean, maybe be a business partner, all those things are there, right? Because they are limited roles. Business partner is
Yes.
just one for that
Yeah.
business, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you cannot create 10 more, right? Maybe the recruitment team might be more, the business partner will only be one for the business, or
Yes.
two, maybe morning and day shift and night shift, right? So the opportunity is not there. But what I'm saying is, if you can learn those things what has been done, I think other organizations always have their requirements about HRBPs and all these things as such, right? I have seen many of my friends transition into HRBP after they've got done with their recruitment role as such.
Okay.
So because nowadays, you have your IJPs and all these things, right? You
Yes.
might not get in
Yes.
the first, might be the next one you get. And a lot of new businesses coming in. I mean, obviously, for an IT company, they have many businesses, and you can
Many.
be an HR partner somewhere else. But for that, you have to show what you're doing. And some of my friends were more HR BPs than recruiters, right? So they used to advise, tell them that this is what it is, and that's how they transition. And the business were also quite happy, right? They were
Yes.
able to manage that. So you are like that central spot for them, right? So that's how it happens. And nowadays, many of them are opening up to recruiters as well, right?
Agreed.
Because they
Agreed.
know, and that's a very deadly combination, like a HRBP and having a recruiter also, right? Recruiting skills as well. You can expand. You can get people, right? I mean, also you can manage them as well. When you have to fire them too, right? So that's your job. I mean, ultimately, as I said, that's a thankless job, and obviously you have to do everything of which is related to that.
Great, great, great tips. Thank you so much, Kingsley. So, my next question here is like you have been in the industry, right? And definitely there are certain moments in your life where you might have found it challenging, or there might be a tough time in your life. Can you share some of your experiences and what you did to overcome those challenging moments?
Yeah. So one of the most I've had many challenging moments in terms of in the recruitment space and as well as the HR space as such. Recruitment, when I had to get my numbers, I mean that 150 per week was something that was very taxing. And primarily I was on a contract role at that time, right? I started with a contract on contract in one of the major IT companies, and every 3 months my contract used to get extended based on performance. Like that
Okay.
went ahead till 18 months till I got my first job with the BPO called Satyam BPO as such, right?
Okay.
So that's how I went ahead. I mean, it was very difficult. Every 3 months you had to wait for your performance to be reviewed, and then your contract is getting extended for 3 more months. I've learned the hard way, right? I've been a contract employee, and now, yeah, I mean, from the transition from there has been very, very different. And I've also seen, from that group where the contract employees had different gates to get into the company as well, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, there were different gates for the contract employee to get in, and there were different gate for the permanent employee to get in. So it was very, kind of a discriminating thing, when I started my career as such. But when you want to get something, right, all these things do not matter, right?
Yeah.
And I've become very strong within myself, right? I mean, over the years, the most challenging thing was, I always dread asking somebody to go. And when I had to ask almost one mini business of about close to 250 people to leave in one single day. So, but out of that, almost about 50-60%, I have placed them outplaced elsewhere through my
Okay.
contacts and other people as well. The remaining, yes, I mean, there's always a hue and cry at that time, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just kicking out people, it is also about being with them. When we had a bad time and that business was not doing so great, they had to shut down to ensure that that continuity for the main business stays, right? So that's the time when it happened. But touchwood, I was very happy that I could outplace them somewhere else as well. And now many of them are in good jobs. So my only dreaded thing in HR is to ask somebody to go. That is the most challenging thing to do. You can give a job, you get blessed, right? You have many people to come and tell you thank you so much and a lot of things. But the moment you tell them that you have to go, that's the worst part for an HR person, right? That I have faced. So that's I think those things is something that I always dread. And I always uh, whenever I hire also, I always keep that in mind, right? Because tomorrow I shouldn't say that that person has to go, right, with whatever reasons, right? So that's something that I could tell you.
Sure, sure. And I can definitely relate, right? Whenever being a manager, because of the business call, we have to let go some other people. And it's not easy,
It's
right?
not easy,
And
absolutely.
everyone is human, everyone have their own family, certain roles and responsibilities. So it's tough for everyone. And I think it's definitely difficult
Yeah.
time for everyone. Great. So moving to our next question, Kingsley. So we have spoken about like your uh, complete journey, transition, little bit about your tips. So we wanted to know Kingsley a little bit more better. So what you'd love to do when you are not being an HR professional,
Mm.
right? When you are not managing the team or managing the business and all. So what you love to do, and how do you spend your time on weekends?
So that's what I do. And I love to create music with my daughter. She plays the piano, and I play the guitar as such. So
Oh,
we create
nice.
music as such. And that's it. I'm spending time with family. That's what primarily I do as such. So
Okay. So I am a new dad, right? Like my kid is just 1 year, 6 months old. So any tips for any new dad like me, like because you have almost compared to more experience than
right,
me in
right.
terms of parenting.
Yeah, yeah. Don't give anything that is online to him or her. I mean, don't give any virtual device or anything that you have, right? So please get into some activity that you can look at, either a sport or some music or something like that, which is a therapy for them. And catch them young. The moment you catch them young, I'm sure, we don't know, right? Someday, Prafulla's child might be in some very big league, right? Where we might be all watching, and maybe I have to do the interview maybe at that time. So I think it's always good to have some activities going on, because the COVID time has spoiled many children, with respect
Yes.
to devices, right? Your mobile devices, your tabs or whatever it is, right? So that has actually spoiled them. Now they cannot get out of it. So it's always good to have some activities going on, because I ensure that my daughter gets into that, because she is trained on the piano, she sings, and all that. So I always ensure that she doesn't miss any of her music lessons and stuff. So yeah, I mean, whenever that has to be given in terms of a mobile or whatever it is that has been given. But not for so long, right? So
Okay.
because what happens is, once you get addicted, you always get addicted, right? So you will not be able to pursue your hobbies. Earlier we had a lot of hobbies which we used to do. Now that hobby thing is not happening anymore, right? So it's only on the devices. Kids only eat looking at the devices. Kids only sleep only looking at the device. So that kind of a generation has come in.
Agree. Agree. Great answer, and thank you for the tips. Definitely, like I will try to keep the
Yeah, yeah,
devices away from my kid how much as possible. So
yeah.
definitely try to do that. Great.
Right.
So moving to a next question, right? So we have spoken in one of our conversation about AI and
Yeah.
ML, right? So how does AI being involved in HR functions as well,
Yeah.
right? What kind
Mm.
of uses you have been seeing altogether? Definitely in talent acquisition, there has been multiple different use cases.
Right. Right.
Do we also have similar kind of use cases in whole of HR?
See, HR, in terms of a transition, you see, in the last couple of years, the HR startups have been so many, right? You might have seen a plethora of people who have come into HR tech as such, right?
Yes.
And especially it has risen. You see the kind of HRMS softwares that are coming in, right? I mean, that's an next level as such. I mean, you cannot name them, right? I mean, so many numbers. I mean, it's in hundreds now, right? And all of them are doing really well because companies are getting on. Everybody understands that everybody needs to use a software, needs to use all these tools and technologies, so that it makes the job easier, right? Maybe if you need five recruiters at one place, maybe with the technology you might only need only two people, right? So
Yes.
that's a kind of level that companies are going ahead with. I've seen many startups who are very particular that they need an HRMS system in their organization. They are no more with Excels, right? The Excel thing, you do something and that file is deleted and everything is gone, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
nowadays, of late, companies are investing heavily on HR technology, in terms of getting the best practices on, right? You ensuring that the employee's journey in the organization is seamless, right? So for which I think gone are the days where you have to wait for your ID card, you have to wait for your this one, the welcome kit, and everything is given on the day one, right?
Yes.
Everything has been done, right? And even the insurance part is also covered, all that. So now all that has to happen obviously on the day one. I mean, it cannot happen on day two at all, right? Because you might also need to look at that, these are very finer aspects which make a big difference in everyone. So
Yes.
companies are leveraging the best in terms of getting in, even for talent as well, right? Talent, there are so many tools, right, which I've also used. You have your online interviews which have been happening. You have psychometric tests which are there, right? Which they can do it, right? I was working on one of those tool called HireView, which used to do
Yeah.
your online
Yeah.
interviews and all these things. The talent neuron is one thing, right? Talent neuron gives you pockets where your manpower, I mean your probable talent is, and that goes off as a report to the business saying that this is where you can hire people from. Like
Okay.
for an example, I wanted to hire some precast people. I had approached them, right? They had given me some areas where Gujarat, Gurgaon, all these places is where these precast stuff is. Precast is basically you make your building materials at the factory,
Okay.
transport them, and
Okay.
put them at the site, right? So those kind of people, so they are trained guys. So they had suggested that they are available in Gujarat or in Gurgaon. We did a walk-in there, and we could.
Okay.
That is how the world is equipping itself with, and companies are equipping with a lot of things like this, right? Even be it an HRM system which has to be robust, right? It has to give you everything, right? The average age in the organization, immediately somebody will ask, right? You might not know. So all your engagement. Now most of the HRMSs in the organizations have become like your Facebook tools as such, or your Instagram or whatever it is. They post everything there, right? So it's become like that. So organizations are changing, people are changing. Obviously, if technological change is happening, we also need to adapt to that as well.
Totally agree. And is it all the layoffs and other things? Is it because of this introduction of AI happening, or like it's not related? What's your take on that?
I would say partly because of this too, and also maybe because vision of the business is not very clear. Certain times that also happens, right?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
because I know of one of the groups where I worked, where right from the beginning it took off as a great company. Right, I will not name the company, or else I'll be in trouble. So, so it took off as a great company in the healthcare space. But after about 3 4 years, 4 years down the line, I think the revenues were not really hitting so high, but they had a huge team, right? So what happens is, certain times, along the way, the vision changes. You cannot do that, right? When you are focused on a particular thing, and business is getting on with a particular thing, I think you will have to go ahead with that, right? Later on, you have to do some risks. You have to take some risks. This business did not take that risk. So what happened is, we had to ask all the people to go, right? So it somewhere along the way, what happens, that is one part. As also, when all these technological advancements have happened, obviously, they're saying that robots can take over humans after some time,
Yeah.
right? We don't know, right? We are living in such a world, right? Today we have a job, this minute, this day, it is okay. Tomorrow we don't know whether we have a job or no. So that's how fast, things are, right? Teslas are coming to India, and a
Yeah.
lot of things are, happening. So tomorrow, we do not know, somebody can rob our job. I mean, somebody can take off our, things as well, with the kind of advancements that are happening. So it is basically, we'll have to sharpen our, sword, in ensuring that we learn, we equip ourselves better, we get to know the newer technologies. If you do not update, I think you will get worn out, right? So that's how the world is advancing now.
Totally agree. Great. So we are almost in the time. So with this, like I just have a couple of more questions to you,
Yeah, yeah.
Kingsley. So definitely you have been in industry and you have been a great leader. You have been a great mentor as well, right? So many of the IC recruiters or IC folks, individual contributor folks, they want to become a great leader or they want to move to a management side. So what's your tip? How someone can be a great leader altogether?
See, great leadership only comes by, that person being very humble, humility in his approach, right? What happens is, many of the times I see HR people are more interested in the transactional affairs, that they forget the human face, of the people, right? That is more important. You're there to ensure that you do something for the, people as well, right? To be a great leader, you have to go travel with your team, right? uh, there may be people who will say that I'm traveling with my team, but not really traveling with their team,
Yeah.
right? So it's always ensuring that, the team is first. The debit is mine, credit is yours. That's kind of a,
Okay.
a concept. We need to always do that. And leaders never take credit, right? They get it, right? You don't need to go around, run around for anything that I have done, no, right? So it's always a team, right? Even if you have played a part, it's always a team, right? The team comes first, then the leader comes, right? And you have to ensure that the team commits mistakes. You are there, right? The leader is there to ensure that, if the mistake is being committed, he will set it right, right? But you allow them to commit mistakes, but they will learn, over and above, right? So that's how it is. And ensure that you are well equipped and when, knowledge in terms of, what you're doing, right? The moment you do not know anything, you can just talk anything under the sun. So a leader needs to have all this, needs to have a vision, needs to have a very clear cut, knowledge about, what is happening in the market, and, within the segment as well. So this would make, somebody, really, capable to lead a team. That's what I can tell you.
Great. Thanks, Kingsley. I definitely believe that as a leader, definitely it's always about a team, and I have heard from multiple different leaders as well in terms of credit and everything, which I try my best to follow as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And yeah, great. So last, before we wind up our call, so about the community, right? We are just trying to build a new community name called I Am a Recruiter, and the reason why we uh, thought of building this community was post layoffs, right? We have seen there are many different recruiters available in the market looking for a job.
yeah.
We thought that there is a gap between the recruiters and between the jobs. So we thought of building a community to help bridge the gap between the recruiters and the job. right?
Yes.
And that is one of the reason why I tried to connect with you, invited you for this podcast, because you have been in the talent acquisition function, you have been in HR function, right? And how one can think of transitioning from multiple different roles altogether, right?
Right.
So we have learned lots and lots of things from you today. So what do you think about the community and why it is necessary to be part of a community?
See, community is always, your networking is first that comes in with people. You learn a lot. You tend to learn a lot. Certain things that you might not have known. Maybe I will also learn a lot of things if certain things I would have missed out. Right. For learnings as well as networking is something that any community comes forward. Right. You get to understand the nuances of the recruitment recruiting industry, or you will face it, see the challenges. Your SWOT analysis happens, right? What happens, something that you might be discussing might be helpful for somebody else. And when you stay in a community, you grow in your respective departments by looking at, by getting the knowledge that you get in a particular community, which is filled with the brightest recruiters, the brightest HR people there, right? So obviously, that is a great initiative that you've taken, Prafula. I want to congratulate you on that, because this is something that brings people together. Even if somebody has something to ask, they can ask it here, right? Rather not ask directly to the business, right? So maybe there might be something that somebody wants, maybe a market survey of something, right? Or there might be somebody else who can pitch in for that person, right? So I'm looking at this kind of a profile, where do I get this? So these are all things which happens in a community, and a community which stays together always does work together. So that's my prime thing about it as such.
Great. Thank you so much for your kind words, Kingsley. Really, we have learned a lot. Personally, I have learned a lot because I could definitely relate lots of things which you have shared with us. Like in certain areas, I felt that I'm in that current phase
Yeah.
which you have already passed. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, and it was an interesting discussion altogether. Our audience will love our discussion and from your experiences you have shared. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Kingsley.
much. Thank you so much, Prafula. You've been so kind enough to invite me on this podcast. Thank you. You're doing a great job with respect to the community. I'm a recruiter, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much.
Same here, Kingsley. Bye bye. Please take care.
Bye. Thank you. You too. Bye.